Alright, we'll go ahead and install this piece on now that we've done all the hard work here. And I just used a little bit of plastic cement and go ahead and bond this in place. Got to be quick with this material. It does dry very, very fast. So just go ahead, get it in. And you can see we can kind of butt it up to the piece. Once we get it in there, just check down the sides and I'll make sure it's completely flat and even and sitting flush in there, which it is. There we go. You guys can see it's pretty much straight down the side. Looks good. Alright, so you guys can see both sides are pretty much installed now. Got them filled in. They're sitting flush with the sides. Really nice. Later on we'll go ahead and fill in the cracks and everything like that with putty. We'll block out all these windows, and in the end we'll spray some test primer and you guys won't be able to see any of these seams. So it looks pretty tacky right now, but trust me, it'll look a lot better in a little while. So I'm going to let this dry overnight and we're going to go ahead and set this aside. Well, I still got about an hour of time to kind of work before I call it here. I'm going to go ahead and get started on the underbody. And this is just my way of being efficient with a project like this. While you wait for glue to dry on something, you move on to something else and you keep working. There's plenty of stuff we can do on this project in the meantime, so I'm going to, like I said, go ahead and get started on the underbody here. Obviously, I don't have any diagrams or anything like that to really be able to tell where the piping and everything goes. Luckily, I have the overland brass model, which is basically dead accurate to the prototype. And you can kind of see the wiring and everything underneath that they've basically used to represent the underbody piping, detailing, brake rigging, all that other stuff. So for the most part, all the detailing on the underbody is actually already pretty accurate for the C27A car. So I'm going to just basically start putting in some styrene shims and stuff like that to do the underbody piping. I'm going to be using steel and brass wire for all this. And I'm going to be using little styrene shims basically like these, if I can get them into the shot, to support the piping. You could use brass rod as well, however it is a little bit harder to work on and it's not as sturdy, so I'm using the styrene. So I'll go ahead and get started and put in some shims and then we'll start installing the wiring section. So you guys can see I've added some basic parts to the model itself here, and these are the braces for the brake rigging, the main brake lines. I always, if I'm going to do brake rigging on a car, I always start with the main components first. It's most important this way. That way you get the main parts out of the way. All the other small details, all the other piping come together later after you get the main part of the piping finished. So I'm going to take some steel wire for the main components and I'm going to bend this to size. Essentially I need to get this cut at an angle. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this car body, the underbody here, jack it up so that it can stay and it's not going to move around. And I'm just going to basically eyeball each bend here. Again, I'm using my overland model as reference here to do the brake rigging. You can see we're on the same side if you look at it real closely. So I'm trying to do all this rigging underneath. So I'm keeping this kind of in the background here just as reference, but the main line here starts here, and then we're going to make a bend this way just a little bit. As you can see, the steel wires, it's pretty easy to bend for the most part. So let's see here. Yeah, there we go. Clean it up a little bit. So we're just keeping on so we're just moving along here. I'm putting a pipe between these two bars here on the bottom of the car based on the example I have of the overland model, the piping. So I need to make a little section of pipe there, and I'm just using my steel again, steel wire, and cutting it to size. But this is just kind of a good example of like the pipe fitting you got to do here. It's just a matter of sizing them, cutting them, and installing them. And I'm using just little drops of glue here and there. Now you don't want to drench the area with glue when you're doing work with pipes like this. It's better to just use a little bit of glue, and then if you need to, add more glue on top of it. Otherwise the part won't tack in place right away. Stainless steel wire is pretty hard to secure, so it's a matter of trying to actually make sure it's going to stay. I'm going to try that again. I don't like that. A little bit there. See if we can get that in place there. There we go. So I'm working on the brake line right now, and the outlets for the hoses on the ends of the coupler boxes. As you can see, I've installed a bit of a shim here to represent the plate for the hose, and I'm using some 025 phosphor bronze wire to represent the air line, which runs along the edge of the coupler box and then into the interior of the floor here. So I've basically made a little elbow, and I'm just going to kind of test fit this, and then we need to cut it down a little bit. There we go. So after I've gotten the brake lines installed, now what we can work on is installing the electrical cabinet and the brake retainer valve here. Excuse me. This piece is made from styrene, and I've installed that here on the model. And then you can see we got all the piping done for the reservoir and everything else in the back here. But essentially, I want to go ahead and install the battery box cabinet here on the corner. Right here on the front is where we're going to install it. And as you can see, I've made this box from bits of styrene. I basically scratch built it. I've installed a little grab iron here, glued it in place. It's nice and secure. I've also went ahead and manufactured some pieces for the air reservoir and stuff like that. These are the little retainer pipes, or the little pieces that you basically grab to relieve some of the air. It's I believe the air relief device or something like that. Alright, so we got the cabinet installed. We'll go ahead and install the retainer piping here, the little discharge valve here. I've made it with some very, very fine 0.10 inch, I believe 0.10 inch, 0.9 inch brass wire. I'm not exactly sure the size here, I forgot, but I'm just using this, and I'm basically cut it in half down the center so I can glue it in certain sections. I'm just going to use a little bit of super glue again not soaking the part, just a little bit. Oops. And I'm just going to kind of I'm going to guide it underneath the part here and then position it in place like this. Try to keep it straight here while it sits up. There we go. And that's basically one side. The other side, the pipe will basically run from the other side and then connect to this little piece here, this guy. I have the pipe again, and I'm just going to kind of estimate how much I need to cut off this piece before I can install it. So about right there, I'd say. About right here. I'll just snip that off. Do a quick test fit. I have to use my tweezers for this. Sorry about the shakiness on the tripod here, guys. I just got to get this thing in the right setup here. That way I'm not blocking anything for you. Alright, now I can actually do this without getting in my own way here. See here, you guys can basically see what we're going to try to do here. We're just going to guide this piece through like this, and then we're just basically going to position it. Damn. Do a little bit more cutting here in the background. And if we test fit that, it looks pretty good. Alright, so what we'll go ahead and do, put a little drop of glue on there, try to position it, again just kind of guide it under all the other pipes very carefully, like this. Then once we get it in place, we'll just let it go. So I'm not really worried too much about the interior of this car as long as I get the majority of the items that are plainly visible, like the bay window seats, the end seat, and then the toilet, or the on this side, the room for the toilet and the sink. Those are the main parts that I really want to have, but I'm not going to go full out with this. Originally, when I built this car, I actually did a full interior based on prototype photos of real C27A cabins, which in hindsight was just completely ridiculous because, you know, you don't even see it. But essentially, I want to basically remount the seats here, and as you can see, I went ahead and removed the seats from the original spots, and I also did some cutting and modifying to the frame itself to make the installation of the car body itself easier to put back on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of styrene, and I'm basically going to glue some plate styrene, which I've cut to size, in these little corners. On this side, the seat is going to go this way. And then on the opposite side, the seat will be reversed, so it'll be more like this, if that makes any sense. So that's what I'm trying to go for here. Just using some 0.40-inch styrene to build up the seat height here. I'm just going to put it right out on the edge like this. And then once I do that, then I can put more glue on the piece of styrene like this. I can take the seat, I'll kind of slide it around a little bit to make sure it's nice and solid, and then I'll just glue the seat in place like that. I did have to do some modifications to the seats as well. I cut off the handholds just because the more modern seats in these cars didn't have those. So that's the only modification I did to the seats themselves, but I'm just trying to get these in their final positions.